Good evening and welcome to Through the Looking Window. This is being brought to you by Open Reflection. This is where narrative ends, where reflection begins, and the path forward becomes a little clearer. And I have this evening with us again Jeff Walker, and I'll introduce you, Jeff. Welcome to the podcast yet again.
Thank you, Brian. Good to be back. I know we had a lot of dialogue the last time, and I know we have a few things to finish up. So,
Yeah, there's no doubt. This is yet another endless thing to talk about. But that's what makes it fun. I think there's just so
yeah,
much, such a
exactly.
target-rich environment. But I think we wanted to continue with some of the compliance issues, and it
Yes.
bleeds off into some other territory that's also just as interesting. So why don't you pick up
Yeah.
for us where we left off, and we'll
Okay.
see where it goes.
Yeah, I think I was, last time we talked, I think I was into middle of 2024, where we were definitely getting pressure from um, the people at the PUC about we weren't making our compliance deadlines. Our legal team was doing the best they can as far as spearheading these. We were definitely telling them to tone it down because of our financial situation.
That's right. Yeah.
As I stated in the last meeting, I had sent up a definitive email on May 18th to one of the lead people at the PUC and said, "Hey, if we don't get our rates adjusted, we'll be in receivership by October of 2024.
And
We
before you
just
go
can't
any
spend any
further,
money."
you're really going to have to define the word definitive because I think I
Yeah,
saw that
well,
email and
definitive, it was, well, when you're burning, this is
yeah,
my view, my open reflection. When you're burning through $10,000, losing $10,000 a month, and you only have 100, and you only got 100 grand left in the bank, or over $10,000 a month, you really add it up and you're like burning.
yeah, some quick
So,
cipher
I
in
mean,
there, right?
we were, and we were in the midst of a lot of legal actions that were brought forth by primarily the membership.
Yeah.
And if they ever get onto this podcast, which I hope they do,
Yep.
um, they can challenge me on this. But there were such things as member interventions on the CCNN. Did we were getting legal advice on that to say, hey, that was the expansion for the 4 lots across from Windermere that was approved by the board in um, May of 2022. And we were just following the direction of our legal team, which, in my opinion, were very good. And I think it was the right strategy. And member intervention came in and kind of threw a wrench in that for us, which expanded our our legal fees simply because there was more research to do. There was more filings that needed to be done within the PUC. There was a lot more investigation that needed to be done. And when you're at the 10-yard line, and then you get big penalty, and it drops you back 15 yards to the 20-yard line, it's tough to put it into the end zone.
Mhm.
If you've got a strong defense, which a lot of people in the membership were. On top of that, if you recall, we got we got notice of an audit, of an IRS audit, which was initiated by a member. And I gotta continue to ask the question: who turns themselves into the IRS? I mean, who does that? I mean, I just
And
don't get
not
it. We were
not just
blindsided
that,
by
but
that.
it was the point of it, as I understand it, was that they were critical uh, to the prior board, not the board that was sitting there. It wasn't us
That's
that
correct. No,
that
that's correct.
miss.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It was a 20
Fascinating.
yeah, it was a 2022 audit. None of us were on the board. I wasn't on the board. I didn't get elected till 2023.
Yeah.
And what they were challenging was how the corporation was filing their taxes as a 501c3. Don't quote me on those terms, but it was how we were
12
filing our
C12.
taxes as a nonprofit.
Yeah.
That was their big angle.
Hmm.
Well, none of that at the end was true. The
Right.
IRS simply said we didn't have a problem about how you filed. What was happening, what they did discover, which is the costly part of it, ended up is because they had to look at all of our records, we missed some of the 1099s and W-9s that were filed by our subcontractor during that year.
Yeah.
Again, us board, at one time we were down, we're down many board members, trying to scramble to find these records. It just wasn't there. And just to be honest with you, it ended up costing us about, between $25,000 and $30,000 in legal and IRS penalties
Yeah.
that we couldn't afford. And me as a member, I'm like, that's $100. That's $100 that I have to pay for something that shouldn't have happened in the first place.
That's right. And as far as the 1099s go, we even had trouble with that with our board. But as soon as we noticed it, we just fixed it right off. It literally is a process thing. Anytime you do business with anyone, give me this, give me your W-9, let me know what about your company. Otherwise, we're not doing anything further. And it's just that simple. A lot of companies struggle with this.
Yeah, I'm a project manager for a construction company. I do some side work as just a builder, not a developer, and I require W-9s from all my people who do sub work, and they don't come on the job site till then. So I know that, and a lot of people do. But the point is, on both of those examples, on the CCN intervention and the IRS, it would have been nice to include the membership and say, hey guys, we see a problem here. We want to correct it, or we want to take some action against it. Well, what is the ramifications before you go out on your own and do this type of activity? Because it costs each of us dollars.
A little over $11,000, right?
Just for the IRS. Yeah. It took another 100 for the CCN. And we should have, as a community, been involved in that, and not by a single individual or a small group of individuals fighting for these things. These should have been presented at a board meeting and said, we object. We know that there was times that there was people who challenged the previous board about how they were filing their taxes. But to go rogue like that and just send it to the IRS instead of coming to the community and said, here's our evidence. And then we could have brought it to the financial people and said, was there anything wrong with this? Even an independent auditor would probably cost us a lot less. And they would have said, no, you guys are fine. And boom. Right. But no, we get stuck. And I just think that is wrong. I'd like to see us at some point, get to if a member does have an issue with how things are running, that they bring it to the community and not, for a vote, not just taking action on your own. I just think that was wrong. And I didn't mean to get off topic, but those two things, I think a lot of the members, have some problems around that, especially when you're taking money out of people's pockets.
That's right. Yeah.
So we had a lot of that going on, and we were trying to control cost. At the same time, we're trying to do these compliance filings. Not only do we have an IRS now compliance filing, we got the ones from the PUC. And this was shared with the PUC. We were down to only a couple board members doing things. We had no general manager. We had limited funds coming in. We were losing. You did some of the financial work in third quarter, and in the beginning of Q4, you saw it, you realized it, and it just wasn't there.
Yeah, and not only did I realize it for the time that we were in the seat, but I looked back. I got records back to the beginning of time where it regards the corporation. And if you look at remember I did the trend lines, and the trend was on income over expense averaged throughout the year, month to month. And I went back to the beginning of time, and if you look at that trend line, the graph, it's just this. There's not much deviation month to month for quite a number of years. Around 2018, 2019, that started to change. And of course, when the legal bills started to hit, we got a huge spike once the one of the insurance decisions came in, and we got paid for that. And then it went way down the next month as the legal bills got paid. And so if you
Right.
factor all that, what I'm going to get to, I'm sorry it takes so long. Once you factor
No.
the spikes out, you take those spikes out because they're just noise, really, and what you want to look at. And then you trend what the prior board was experiencing. They had the same general downwards angle of available money. In other words, they kept spending, spending, spending,
Right.
spending. They had not enough income. And so when we got it, and I'll make one other point here, because what happened to us and turned into a perfect storm was that not only did we have the same downwards trend, but then we had compiled onto that the appeal, the rate changes, which
The
included
rate order. Yes.
the refunds, and of course that
Yes.
lowered it even worse. So it was really horrible what we had to
Oh,
deal with
yeah.
there financially.
Oh God,
That's
yes.
all I wanted to say
Yeah,
about it.
and and this was that whole rate order. This was something that I was bringing to the community in January and February, having town hall meetings, big charts, and going, "Do you guys understand this? That if you take the base rates and you calculate the refunds, you're only contributing about $8. You know, eight
Right,
dollars per member.
right.
You can't sustain on that.
That's right.
You need an operating. That's you go to every company around here. I mean, you look at the one I just gave it of Double Horn Creek over there. They're $71 a month just for their water.
Hmm.
That's base, and then they have their usage fees.
Hmm.
Everybody's got the base rates plus usage fee. Nobody, and I did some research about that. Nobody in the state of Texas was that low.
So
And if
I have to point out one.
and I'm not
Go
and
ahead.
I'm not blaming, yeah, I'm not blaming the former board. I really think that was a PUC. That was a PUC issue. That
Yeah.
was the PUC really screwed us on that. I agree. I agree with the concept of what the ratepayer representatives were trying to do.
Mhm.
I drank into their Kool-Aid. I got out of their Kool-Aid on December 13th, 2023. I remember the date when I got the memo from the Cobos and went, this is going to bankrupt us.
Mhm.
And because you add, base rates, the two rates, water and sewer against the refunds, and you're only generating $8. I even know that. I mean, I can't go, I can't sustain my company on that or my work effort on that. It
Right.
was just insane. And you go back to the PUC, they go, first thing out of their mouth, and the first thing out of their mouth, out of some of the members' mouth, well, looks like you got to go sell some real estate, and that was spoken in meetings. We can pull those meeting minutes
Yeah,
up.
that's
I've
right.
got
Yeah.
documentation from, because it was an asset and you got to hold on for a year before we were able to do a rate appeal and because we needed to adjust our rates because there's no way we can sustain on that.
Right.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely no way. And and we started down that path in 2024, not to deviate off the compliance issue, but in order to be compliant, follow that compliant, we needed capital. I mean, like I said in the last podcast, the audit itself was going to cost us money. Those are not free, and it was going to cost us anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000.
Mm.
We didn't have it. We didn't have $5,000 to $10,000, and people might say, "Well, why are you spending money on the CCN?" Because the legal team came back and said, "If you don't do this, you're going to get sued by the guy."
Mm.
So, I mean, we were caught in like you say, in a perfect storm, in a catch 2022. And, a lot of people just didn't understand that they like the lower, cheaper rates. I get
Mhm.
that. We get that. But we just couldn't sustain. And then we go forth and try to sell some real estate to keep us afloat, to keep us out of bankruptcy.
Right.
Because, if you did talk to the legal team and to our accountants, receivership and bankruptcy would have been real bad. They would have come in here and taken, they would have looked at us and said, "Oh, you got some airport property sitting over here." They would have taken that from us and they would have sold it for pennies on the dollar
Sure.
to keep us going,
Hmm.
to what we were trying to achieve and we were trying to get. Hence, that's why it was, pushed by the board to really look at that and go, that land is sat vacant for 25 plus years. It's got some hair on it, meaning access issues were a problem. Nobody wanted to take the time to understand where it was platted, airplane traffic to and from. There was confusion about people saying that there was easements given to us. There was nothing in documentation, in the county documentation, to reflect that. Nobody wanted to take the time to understand it. But that was the whole driving point of it. And that's why, I mean, if you look at some of my early notes, I did what is known as a pre-buy title search in January, February of 2024, because I knew we had to get that thing on the market, because I knew we were going to lose money.
Yep.
Starting on March 21st of 2024, because that's when they wanted. That's when the order came down, and I said, and I got documentation of this. I said to the people at PUC, how much lead time do I have till I got to implement that? In the next billing cycle, which was a week away. Next billing cycle, our rates went boom. Did our costs go down? Hell no.
Yeah.
Operator costs didn't go down. We didn't have a chance to look at anything within 10 days from the 21st to the 31st of billing. That's how long we had to scramble to get ready for a rate cut of what I've positioned to the PUC, and you've heard it in my testimony, of over 95%. Because we were at 161 on your bill, and we were going down to $7,
right.
$8.
And there's another thing that when the rate appeal was won, there was jumping for joy in the neighborhood among the folks that were pushing for that. And when I read it, I got on Nextdoor and I said, well, wait a minute. You're not factoring into this the legal fees associated with getting that win. Yes. And of course, I was in a Nextdoor manner shouted down there. But I still think it's a valid point, and it bears itself out. The corporation had to absorb that as well. So go ahead. I just want to make that point.
We did. No, you're right on the money. You are dead on. It's like, that's when I stopped drinking the Kool-Aid, going, oh. On the 13th of December, 2023, when the Cobos memo come out of all the details, I didn't think they were going to gut us that much as far as rates and refunds, the PUC. And then when you add it up, it's simple math. Here's your base rates and here's this. And people thought we were going to pick it up on usage. And I'm like, I look at the daily or the monthly operator report, and it's clear. We had 60 users. 1/5 of our membership used zero water.
Right.
Which means we weren't getting any consumption revenue from those people.
Sure.
We weren't. They were paying $8.
Yep.
And they could have gone over there and turned the tap on, and we still have to produce, water for $300. People couldn't understand that concept, but that's how the plant needed to operate. We didn't scale back the plant. We had to keep up for 300 members. That's what you got to do.
Right.
Even though there's only 240 of them really, turning on the tap. And of that, the next tier of users they used under 1,000 gallons, another 50 people.
Right.
Look at the data. It's amazing though how effective those reports were to open my eyes, going, so 110 users were, paying like $5,000. It was like, you can't sustain. And I talked to other water companies about it, and they're like, oh no, you can't sustain that. That's incredible. How did the PUC do, what did the PUC do to that?
Yeah.
Do to you? And I'm like,
so
I don't know.
Yeah, that's another part of the observation that I mentioned in that Nextdoor post, is that the Ms. Corboros, I guess it is.
Cobos, C-O-B-O-S. Yes.
Okay. Well, she did, I thought, an excellent job in establishing markers at the beginning and the end of that period, right? How many months was it? 43, something like
45.
that? 45 months. So she put a stake in the ground. She went back 45 months, calculated out what the damage was, and did a really good job in that. Unfortunately, then she handed it over to the bean counters at the PUC. And what they did was they took it verbatim and they built a rate structure around that. And they took nothing into consideration about what this really represented. It represented this date going backwards for 4 years, not this date going backwards for 4 years. And oh, by the way, you got to plan for the future here as well. And so the things we're talking about right now are so pertinent here, Jeff, because it really goes to the perfect storm in here. The more we talk about it, there's more of this bad news and stuff that we were dealing with
Yeah.
on a day-to-day basis.
And yeah, and another thing that disappointed me about the rate appeal is yeah, I drank the Kool-Aid, was on board and said, yeah, maybe there was some unfair practice as far as how they did the rate increase back in 2020, 2021. But they were planning for a legal fight, and
Yeah.
maybe they shouldn't have done that. The whole thing, everybody should have just got in a room, locked the door, nobody leaves until everybody's satisfied with it, with a rate structure that can sustain our operating cost, as well as make the members happy.
Now, you've
And we
mentioned
just
that
didn't do
several
that.
times to me over the
Yeah,
time
we
I've
just
known
didn't
you.
do that.
I
And shame
haven't
on
known you
us.
all that long,
Yeah.
but I have to say,
Yeah.
did anything even approaching that occur? Did the PUC offer to get folks together to talk some of this stuff out?
I I heard rumors, but I can't validate that
Okay.
that there was a chance to maybe negotiate it out. And a matter of fact, when I got on the board, I asked a couple people, "Is there a way we can negotiate this?" This was in 2023,
Hmm.
and not stop the legal spend,
Oh,
stop the
yeah.
freaking
Yeah.
legal spend, and get the ratepayer representatives in one room, the legal in another room, and a mediator, and say, "Hey, we know that we had a problem here. You want to, ratepayers, you think we should be here. How do we come together? We
Hmm.
have got to start doing that.
Right.
If we don't do that in a community, we're going to have, legal issues going forward.
Hmm.
I mean, anytime you have that, you should all just sit in a room and figure it out.
It
We had a
should be.
contentious of a board. Was the board necessarily communicating correctly? Probably not. Were ratepayers communicating and if effectively and such? Probably not. Everybody was guilty, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Well,
Users, I mean, the members were guilty. I mean, us members were guilty by not, taking a better side or a better understanding of what was going on. So we
yeah.
were all
Yeah.
guilty of it, and
I mean,
it cost us dearly. I mean, I
exactly.
mean, we're still 500 Lloyd Gosling,
Hmm.
and we have a monthly surcharge that all of us have been paying.
Yeah.
But I know that at least when I was on the board until recently, we had not made a payment to them. So where'd that money go? It went to pay operations because, you know,
Hmm.
of our rate structure. I
It's a
mean,
priority. Yeah.
it's easy. It's so easy math. And the report that nobody really liked to talk about was the third page of the monthly opera directors report that
Right.
had all the members and their usage and the categories and how many were in this bracket and how many, and that was just eye opening to
It's
me, going,
enlightening. Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
yeah. And talk about it looking through the window. I was like, oh my God. And that's where I got all the data about when I sent the email up to in May, going, we're going to be bankrupt in in 6 months because we only have this amount in savings, and it's costing us this much to produce water.
That's right.
And my focus was always on making sure the operators got paid, making sure we were going, doing the right things legally, and the compliance filing. Absolutely. Was I guilty of not focusing on it? Absolutely.
Hmm.
But going back to my question to you about, or maybe I didn't ask it yet. I mean, you got involved in the compliance filing to
Oh,
put
yeah.
together that
Yeah.
Schedule B.
Yeah.
Give it, reflect on it a little bit. What
Sure.
you saw there.
Sure. Well, that was literally the first activity that I got involved in. And as I mentioned on the last podcast, it took me some time to get traction because, I'm not the type to jump into an organization and start ordering people around. I'm a new guy, so I'm taking hints and orders from other people that know a lot more than I do and still do, frankly. So one of the things I saw where I thought I could be some help, and I essentially asked to be able to go and run with it, was this Schedule D document. And so it's a multiple page Excel worksheet. And essentially, it's the corporation's way to inform the PUC that they're still in business, they're still operating, they're still at this location. They didn't move the plant, and these are the financials and some other things like that. And so, really, it wasn't much work for me other than organizing, determining who to talk to. That was part of the
Right.
challenge. And then basically what I did was I formulated a plan where I would give the document to one person or one organization, and I would say, I want you to go through these tabs, and where you recognize information, I want you to add it, put it in. And they did that one after another. And it came back to me, and it was mostly complete. And that I took and I let it, I provided it to some people, and that was it. And it was not that big of a deal. I don't think it quite took me 3 months. I think it maybe half of that, maybe 2 months or so, for whatever reason. Not everybody works at the speed of life of light
No,
like you and I
exactly.
do, in the corporate world. But when they did what they could.
Yeah.
They produced a decent result, and we passed it on. So I'm not sure
Yeah.
what else you want to know about that, but that
Well,
was
well,
my
I
experience
think
there.
I think, in late 2024, I think it was used. I think what you had put together was very valuable and needed, and it was a requirement in compliance filing. But if we didn't have volunteers that were on that came on the board in
Yeah.
second quarter like yourself, that would have never gotten done. I mean, that's going back to your comment on our last podcast was what you learned in this whole Toma investigation was, yeah, you have a sitting board, you have some rules, you got to have open meetings, but was really driving it would be committees that can talk amongst themselves and get things done.
That's right.
And a Schedule D would have been a perfect thing. Some of these compliance filings, which is what I spoke about the last one. I was hoping that a committee would be formed to take on the bylaws,
Mhm.
and they can go off and they can collaborate amongst themselves. And the board member has just kept appraised of what was going on.
Yep.
there's no there's no toma violations if they all meet as a committee.
Mhm.
They could have used a bunch of stuff, but
Yes.
that's what I was hoping would have happened with a lot of those compliance filings, was people getting involved. And I just thought the community would come together. And for
Right.
some reason, maybe it was me or other people that just didn't want to take that on. And
Yeah.
some people just don't want to volunteer. They just don't.
Well, I
And
explained why
and
that is in the last meeting too. But one thing I didn't mention that I think is also critical is a couple things actually. That the committee, the beauty of the committee is they can go off and they can develop options and then present the
yes,
options to the board, make their suggestion, and the board votes on that. That's the formal part. That's how it should work. The other thing is every committee is supposed to have an assigned board member. And there's nothing preventing that I could see that board member from sitting in on those committee meetings and talking through it right along with them. And the
yeah,
third thing that I remember hearing when I think it was in the previous board, one of the board members mentioned that the president of the corporation is a de facto committee member of every committee in that organization, and that absolutely
yes.
is the case. I verified that. They got a lot of pushback on that when the person said it, but it is true.
No, it is true. And we kind of challenged that with some of the previous board members. I know I did, because I thought it was, you know, I, do you always want that to happen? But those are the rules. Those are the rules that we were given. Now that would be a good thing for the bylaws to address, to say, do we want that? Do we want the president to have that much power and influence into every one of those committees, or do we want to keep them autonomous and say maybe we don't want a de facto type of capabilities for the president to be involved in everything? I don't think it should be, because that's a dictatorship.
Yeah, but I think
In my opinion.
maybe misunderstanding a little bit of it here. It doesn't say that they must participate it says that they, by edict, they are a de facto member of the committee. It doesn't mean they could need to lord it over every committee or whatever. It's just that I think it goes to ultimate responsibility, I think is what it goes
Right.
to. That's
Yeah.
really the point.
Well, that means, yeah. And my point is that puts a board member and another board member on a committee
Hmm.
because he's a de facto, which means he kind of has a vote. And we want, my view would be you want that board member to come back singly and say, here's what the committee reviewed on, here's the direction we should take, and not have a de facto type of influence
Yeah.
there and say, no, 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 I don't agree with option A, I agree with option C,
Hmm.
type of thing. And
Right.
that's kind of what I saw with one of the ones that I was on.
Yeah. Well, as you
For the
say,
legal
it's something that can be
subcommittee.
talked through at some point and
Yeah,
determined.
yeah,
Yeah, as a
yeah.
change.
So yeah, these are just all the things that you know what it was facing in the summertime of 2024, and that we were just getting, you know hammered on, misled, whatever you want to call it, um, by a lot of factors.
Mm.
Legal. Where should we spend our money? How do we keep things slowly moving forward?
Mhm.
I knew for a fact. I shouldn't say a fact, but I had conversations with the PUC. If we miss these deadlines, yeah, we're not in compliance. They're Even though they use that as an avenue for the temporary manager, they're not going to fine us. They're not going to shut us down. They were not going to do any of that. We look at us. We are a 300 member, utility in Texas. You should Google. Everybody should Google water companies in a 100-mile radius of us,
Sure.
and there'll be like 10 or 15 water companies,
Hmm.
popping up. Kingsland, Double Horn Creek, right down the way. There's, Granite Shoal. Well, there's not Granite Shoals. There's a bunch up in the Highland Lakes area. They're all small little ones,
Hmm.
and they're all throughout Texas. I think there's like 3,000 of us.
Hmm.
These small water utilities. The PU we were we're a pain in the
We
ass to the
sure are.
PUC.
Must be, yes.
We really are, because we have these problems and we don't know how to manage it, and our costs are very similar to everybody else's cost of producing clean water. They all use the same similar kind of technology. It goes into, you pump it out of the ground, you pull it out of a lake, and you got to go through some purification.
Yeah.
You have to do that, whether it's through filters, whether it's through clarifiers or such.
Yeah.
There's a cost of operating that, and these operators are not cheap.
Hmm.
They're not. I mean, they've got to be certified, they've got to be licensed,
Hmm.
they have to take remedial education. I mean, they have to have service trucks, they have to be available 24 hours for breaks. They have to, report TEC back to the TECQ about quality controls and
Hmm.
standards. They have to put their name on it.
Yep.
It's just like, any licensed, person out there, a licensed electrician, a licensed plumber, you know, they have a lot going on, and that's what costs money. That's why the operators, charge what they need to charge.
Right. Right.
And but just, Google those water utilities, and you'll see that there's a lot of them. And the PUC recognizes that, and they're like going, "Oh my God, look at these guys! These guys are screwed up. They're screwed up. Everybody's screwed up out here." And it's, a lot of it has to do with just the community just doesn't know.
Right.
You know,
And
they just don't know. There's not enough qualified people.
right.
But going back to my point, the
Hmm.
PUC was not going to come after Windermere Oaks and fine us.
That's right.
I'll
And
challenge any of those memberships over there to, they may say it, they may, beat their chest and go, we're gonna fine you if you don't do this compliance.
mhm.
I have a feeling you probably appeal that to the commission and go, are you sure you want to put a $10,000 fine on me when I'm losing $10,000 a month? Come on.
Mhm.
That doesn't make sense. We're doing our best we can to meet those requirements.
Right. Eh,
And, it's not that we're just, sitting around, going, oh, well, I can get to that later. We can do that. We just didn't have the resources. Didn't have the
Yeah. With
resource or
any
capital.
with any federal or state organization, I have to remind myself of the few times when I've been involved, like with the IRS or nothing critical, just personal stuff. They're people. They're just people. If you're trying to hide stuff from them, they'll know it. They'll sense it. And for our part, at least when I was on the board, where it regards the PUC, I think the communications probably could have been a little better. I think the TM, the temporary manager, kind of schooled, probably got a little school there, where they were pretty often posting stuff into the docket to let the PUC know what progress they were making. I think if we
Hmm.
had done that more often, that might have helped some things keep the communication going. Because
Yeah.
it's like if you go dark, and I don't think we did it on purpose, then who knows what they're thinking. And if something doesn't come in
Yeah.
time, then
Yeah.
a bureaucrat's looking to check a box off. They really don't care
Yeah.
about the rest of it. I
Yeah.
think that's partly your
You're
point,
absolutely right.
but
Yeah.
your point on the
I mean, we
positive
weren't.
side also goes to the negative side if they can't check their box enough months in a row.
Yeah. Yeah. Did we, I know I didn't, I know some of the other board members at the time, we didn't willfully just ignore it. We just, we were overwhelmed. I know I
Yeah,
was, looking at our financials going, holy crap, what are we going to do come October? What do you do come in November? And that's, you've ran projects, I run projects. And if you don't have the money to support, the next phases that you're working on and to get the funding, it's like, holy crap, what am I going to do? Am I going to turn the water plant off? Do I not produce clean water? Does the TECQ going to get more involved, and so on? I mean, sleepless nights just because, are we going to be able to pay our bills? Do we pay the electric? Do we pay to keep the lights on? I
yep,
mean, that's where I was focused, and I was simply not focused on compliance issues
that's right.
because
Yeah.
if anybody wants to sit here, I'll be more than happy to come to their house, meet in a location, and talk about revenue. And I said that a lot. And it's not about rates. It's about revenue. What do you produce in a monthly basis? What do you bill on a monthly basis? And if you look at the director's report, front page has what we received on a monthly basis, and then you take it against your expenses, and it's real simple math. We were generating this, but we were spending this.
Yep.
I mean, it was like, and it's like deer in the headlight going, oh crap. And there's no way to bring in any more revenue. You can't. They're just impossible. You can't go over there and say, okay, people, you know, run your water taps, generate, buy some more
Right.
water from us, buy some
Yep.
more water. You can't do that because now you're also in a drought situation. So we're under a drought contingency. You can't do that. There was no way to generate any more revenue.
Perfect
Um,
storm. That's
yeah,
another
and
factor right
and
there. The
and and,
drought.
and another thing, people didn't understand that,
Yeah.
but I'd be more than happy to sit down with people and go, this was our revenue sheet, this is what the bank was saying, this is what our invoices were, and to try to cut it down, it was impossible. Then you had, member influence out there, and I know people don't like to hear this, but the tax audits cost us a lot of money.
Mhm.
We had to pay accounting and legal fees, or the IRS was coming after us. I mean, how do you make those decisions? I sat in board meetings. They go, they were like, there was members who go, well, did you? They were bitching about legal expenses, but then they wanted us to. Did you hire a tax lawyer? Wait a minute. You told me to cut legal expenses, but you want to go out and have me hire a tax lawyer? What? We're trying to get the hell out of it. We're trying to say, what do we need to do? We'll give you whatever we got. Tell us what happened, and let's get out of it. And we got an $11,000 penalty. I think that's still pending, and
Yeah.
what it is, and it was all based upon stupid stuff that we tried to correct, and just we ran out of runway on it.
Yeah.
What do you do? What do you do in those situations? And again, I'm not trying. I'll take responsibility on the compliance issues actually, but again, was the PUC was what we were doing as far as lack of entry into the compliance filing hurting us in delivering quality water? No. And that's what I always went back to the PUC with, is going, you're right, our bylaws are not updated yet. We have a good election procedures. We did the Schedule D. We're trying to work through the financial audit. We just don't have a lot of the records. It's costing us money. I'd rather spend money paying our operator than, paying for our accounting team. You got to make hard choices.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we were doing. And then the PUC just didn't like that. And what did the PUC do in September, end of September? Boom. Sent me an email. I don't know if you got it because you were on the board.
No, I was
That
not.
they put a petition out there to put us under a temporary manager. And I was definitely disappointed about how it came about.
Yeah.
It because we were blindsided by it. It was on a Friday afternoon at 3:00, and the person who, in my opinion, shouldn't be driving us, because that person lives in Portland, Oregon, and you should have access to him down in Austin. Then you go have a face-to-face meeting with them,
Mm-hmm.
and none of this stuff on emails and phone calls and Zoom calls. It's not productive. You need to sit down and have a conversation with somebody when you're in this crisis.
Right.
And it blindsided me, and it was all centered around, we didn't meet the compliance filings. You need help. Yeah, of course we need help. But it wasn't, I went off on the PUC about this. It wasn't about, we just needed we needed revenue, and we needed resources to help filings.
Mm-hmm.
The way that, in my opinion, I was the one who filed that. In my opinion, the way that they should have been taken on, such as a committee should have been formed to look at our bylaws, and not just change a few things like we tried to do. They haven't been updated. I mean, a pure update. When you go through, we've all seen this. When you go through and you remodel a house, you try to look at all the functions and say, well, you got some bad plumbing over here. You got bad this. You got some bad electrical stuff. You should really take a look at all of it. And that's what we really need to do. We needed to investigate the whole thing and then come back. And that was just one of them.
Right.
But that led us into, the compliance filing, which, I think, but not doing more and taking a look at it, especially in record management, I still think it's going to come back and haunt us if we don't have electronic means of capturing everything. I mean, I work for a builder, and as a project manager, and everything is electronic. Every invoice, if you want to get paid, it's electronic and it's stored.
Yeah.
There is no paper sent to our office. We don't care who you are. We don't care if you're the smallest guy who does one thing for us. Figure out how to get on email, how to put it on an invoice, and send it to us.
That's right.
And we needed that from every one of our vendors. There were some of the vendors that, from the old means, that would put it on a napkin and they would give it to some of the old board. And who's going to track that piece of paper or that napkin or whatever it's written on? The chewing gum wrapper. It was like insane. You just can't do that.
Yeah.
Especially with a regulated utility,
Right.
like ours, because we're regulated by the PUC. Anytime, those all should have come in electronically to a central hub and been able to be stored and managed and categorized into, hey, what about the barge electrician? How much do we spend for him? How much do we spend on chemicals and these specific chemicals and so on? We just didn't have it.
Right.
And that to me is a good records management system.
Okay. Good.
And we just, I don't know how they're going to approach it, but that's my vision when I put that in the compliance filing. When it was being formulated, was we needed it to be electronic, web-based. It's technology. You're in Central Texas, a technology hub. There's tons of those people that are out there that can get us that. But what does it take? It takes somebody to put it all that program together, a committee, and it takes money.
It really does.
And we didn't, it really does. So I don't know, what was our time frame?
Well, we shoot for 40. We're a little over right now. I'm okay with that. Generally, let's try and wrap it up though.
Okay.
Some of the stuff you mentioned, you didn't mention the term abandonment. I definitely want to get into that on one of these calls.
Yeah. Okay.
I've done
okay, good.
I've done
good.
a lot of research on that. I have some strong opinions on that, so I'd love to talk about it. Um,
Well, good. We'll save
so
that. We'll save that for the next time. So now
yeah,
we're up. We're through compliance. I think we spent a lot of time. Everybody knows what it is. They can hear it. If anybody wants to call me, they got my number.
yeah,
Talk more about the compliance filing. But that's what triggered. That's what triggered the temporary management program coming in.
right, right.
And you know my feeling on the whole thing. I think it needed to be, but we'll talk more about it. Maybe at the next, if I'm invited back on the next podcast about what I saw and what I testified against. When I went in there, and again, we went in there, and I know I'm going to talk more about this. We went in there at no cost. That didn't cost us any legal fees to do the hearing.
That's right.
Zero legal fees.
Yeah,
Because we did it all on our own.
yeah.
We did it totally, totally all on our own.
Good.
So it was, and I want to get into that about why we took that approach,
Good.
and
Good.
such. So,
Excellent.
okay.
Yep, that sounds
Okay.
good.
Well,
All
thank
right.
you again.
So, yeah, yeah. I think we covered a lot of ground. We meandered a bit. That's good. That's okay. Perfectly okay. We love it.
That's what it's about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It really is. Just
Okay.
this is a wonderful way to just have an open conversation and enjoy a little bit of time, talk about it, little few war stories, and
Yep.
no
A
extra
little
charge.
reflection.
Yeah,
A
exactly.
reflection. Open reflection.
Okay, or
You know.
whatever he said about it.
There we
Yeah.
go.
All right,
Okay.
great.
Well, I hope I get invited back, Ryan. Thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff, and have a great evening. Appreciate your time.
You too. Appreciate it.